Hey everyone, this is Hogan Gidley. Today, Chad Wolf and I will sit down with Bob Unanue for a very special episode of The Tank, where we'll discuss Bob's role as executive producer of the blockbuster mega hit movie The Sound of Freedom and the initiative he's formed to fight human trafficking. Welcome to The Tank.
Coming to you from our nation's capital, this is The Tank, your voice in Washington, D.C. and around the country. Broadcasting from the America First Policy Institute offices in D.C., this is the premier think tank podcast where we discuss the challenges facing our nation, talk policy, and advance America First solutions. Welcome to The Tank.
Hello, this is Chad Wolf.
And this is Hogan Gidley.
Well, Hogan, last week we began talking about that blockbuster hit, The Sound of Freedom, which has just been topping the charts and setting all sorts of records in sales and really has sparked a critical conversation about child sex trafficking. Today, I'm excited to continue that conversation with an individual who's not only a powerful voice for that America First movement, serves on the board of directors for AFPI, but is also an executive producer for The Sound of Freedom, and that's Bob Unanue. You know, Bob's the president and CEO of Goya Foods, America's largest Hispanic-owned food company. He's overseen a historic growth of the company over the last several years, but probably most importantly for this conversation, he also started Goya Cares, which is a global initiative dedicated to combating child trafficking and educating on child mental health. And so what a treat and an honor to have Bob with us today to talk about The Sound of Freedom and the importance of his role in that and the importance of Goya Cares. So, Bob, welcome to The Tank.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you, Hogan. It's great to be with you.
Well, Bob, thank you again for your time. Let's jump right into it. Before we discuss the movie, and there's a lot to discuss there, I just wanted to touch on, you do serve as a board member here at the America First Policy Institute. Just in your own words, you know, why was it important? You do a lot of things, and you can do a lot of things with your time. Why did you make the decision and the importance of really sort of joining forces with AFPI and putting time and attention and resources into it?
Well, you know, as they say in the movie, you know, when God calls you, you don't hesitate. And I got a visit by the amazing Brooke Rollins and Linda McMahon, of course, the amazing Chad Wolf and Hogan Gidley, and so many other incredible people on AFPI, America's First Policy Institute, and you know where we're joining together the policies and the values that bring America first and together. So Brooke made a trip out to one of our locations where I was here in Texas. We have a big factory here, and you know, she asked if we wanted to join this with AFPI, and I was more than happy to do so because it just goes, you know, down that path of the important things in our country and our world, those values that unite us all.
Well, I appreciate that, Bob, and it's such again, on behalf of all of AFPI, it's great to have your leadership and your voice embedded in everything we do. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Bob, and it sounds like you really didn't have a choice because honestly, look, when God comes calling, it's tough to say no. But when you couple that with Brooke and Linda, it's dang near impossible at that point to turn it down, right?
Yeah, no contest. You know, you're done.
That's right. Well, speaking of some successful pairings here, you jumped in to join The Sound of Freedom, an incredible movie that's just breaking all records, even though so many on the left are trying to suppress it, the typical things they do when you're bringing truth to the public. How did you first get involved with the film, introduced to it? Kind of talk about your first impressions and then what it led you to do.
Well, you know, it's an interesting story, Hogan. I met Eduardo Verástegui. My name is Basque, also Unanue, so I can pronounce his name a little bit better than most. Verástegui is a tough one, but he's Mexican. He was a big actor in Mexico, and a lot of you know, he was a heartthrob and all this, but he changed his life, and he wanted to dedicate his life to making films and sending a message about things that were good and move closer to God. So he, I'd say about 15 years ago, he was 33 at the time, I think he's about 48 now, he made the movie Bella. Then Bella was preceded by Little Boy, and he's done a lot of good works. I ran into him at the White House in 2018, and he said, "Hey, Bob, I'm working with this guy, Tim Ballard, who goes in and rescues children, these children that are trafficked. And we're doing a movie about it with Alejandro Monteverde, who's just a tremendous talent, in my opinion. And I had no idea what he was talking about. This was something that was not out in the light. This trafficking issue, of course, is not as big as it is now. The way we have, our border wide open and all that, and almost you have almost the U.S. sometimes serving almost as a middleman, as this gal Rodas said, this whistleblower, talking about ORR and all that. But so fast forward a little bit, they make this movie. It's amazing. It's made and came out in 2018, and it highlighted this trafficking. But 20th Century Fox had it. Disney bought them out, and they shelved it. They put it into the closet, into the back room, and it was sitting there for a while. I spoke to this gentleman once about how he saw things in this country, and he said, the U.S., God spoke to him. He said, the U.S. is not ready yet. We have to suffer a little bit more. And I think had the movie come out back then, it wouldn't have had the impact that it has now. I think, the human trafficking has become such a huge thing that what may have been considered extreme or not real before has come into the light. And so this movie brings that out to the light. So it was sitting there. It wasn't moving. And Eduardo, Disney had it. They were killing it. So Eduardo asked if there's any way we could take it out of Disney. And we did. We joined forces, and that's when we became executive producer and bought it from Disney. And still, for years, it stayed there. Then, like an angel from heaven, Angel Studios, the Harmon Brothers, and this is just in the last few months, they've taken this hidden gem and brought it out into the light and truth, which is just creates awareness and exposes this tremendous evil that's happening. So, and it's just, they're still trying to attack it. They're still attacking it. They're trying to get it out of some of the theaters, cut it short. They're well over 4 million tickets sold. And it's just out of 2,600 theaters, screens, and doing an incredible job. Now, Disney, who had Indiana Jones with $295 million movie, has not had the success per screen that this Sound of Freedom has. It's like a movement.
Yeah, Bob,
the awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. You make an interesting point talking about perhaps if it was released in 2018, when it was finally completed, maybe it didn't have the impact that it does today because of a variety of different factors. But the idea that you mentioned, or not the idea, but maybe just the fact that Disney shelved this, I guess a lot of people kind of scratching their heads and saying, why would they do that? Is it just a poor management decision, you think, on their part? Or was there something more going on? Obviously, it's not a light and fluffy Disney film. It deals with a very difficult issue, and some would say it's a very dark movie, but it's a very serious movie at the same time. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I was down on the border with last year and a year or so ago, and you look at the Gulf cartel. They're $80 billion business. I think human trafficking around the world is like a $250 billion business. There's 85,000 children who have been lost in this country, millions of children trafficked. And I think you got to look at you go to the bottom line, the money behind this. The steps in trafficking are grooming or befriending, intoxicating, alienating and isolating from the families and friends, desensitizing, but finally capitalizing. But really, the goal is to capitalize. And there's so much money in this. It's the largest industry in the world. It's almost as if, I know you have people saying, hey, we got to bring these kids in faster and faster and faster. Why? Because unless you want people, I believe people are profiting from this.
Yeah.
It's very dark. It's very evil. And, so the people who come and criticize this, they stand something to gain by it. But anything that moves toward God, people attack.
Yeah.
Right.
And, Jim Caviezel, Tim Ballard, they've been attacked ruthlessly. But I think at this time, you got the Angel Studios, you got the hand of God in this, I believe. And this is a time where the people are saying, wait a minute, this isn't extreme dogma. This isn't QAnon. This isn't some crazy thing. This is reality.
It's a true story.
And we're accepting that.
Yeah,
it's a true story.
It's a true story. So can you believe, though, in the face of the criticism and the face of the skepticism and the lies being told about this film, Bob, can you believe how successful it's become? So many fewer screens than Indiana Jones, such a smaller budget. I mean, could you have ever fathomed how successful this film would become? And it's still relatively new in theaters.
This is absolutely the hand of God, the Holy Spirit, because we're in a spiritual war. And by the way, with Tim Ballard, this isn't one and done. He's out in Utah, Operation Underground Railroad. For years, he's been putting his life on the line for these children. He was recently over in Ukraine. Ukraine had a lot of surrogate mothers, a lot of kids abandoned over there. These guys are around the world. They go in with ex-Green Berets. They risk their lives to save kids. It's amazing that this movie, The Sound of Freedom, one child is saved, little teddy bear, Miguel, and Aguilar. And then his sister, he goes, what about my sister? They undertake this mission, risking their lives to save one child, which highlights the fact that every single life has value and purpose. Our lives are gifts from God. And so I think it's interesting that this goes to saving one child. And who could be against it? I said, who could be against this? But you know what? They come out of the woodwork, the people that want to hate and destroy and divide. Martí from Cuba said, the people who are born to love and build, others to hate and destroy. The people who are criticizing have never done a darn thing in their lives. Nothing good. They just sit back and criticize. That's their function. So let's celebrate the good.
You're so right, Bob. I mean, we talked a little bit about this on the last episode of The Tank. This criticism coming from mainly the media, but also elite Hollywood, talking about how this is somehow some right-wing conspiracy movie. And of course, they not only said this about the movie, though, but they also said this about former President Trump when he was talking about child sex trafficking and the smuggling and the human trafficking that he was being told about along that border. And it's a big reason why he wanted to secure that border. And they leveled the same criticism against the president. And you're exactly right. These are individuals. They're not serious individuals. And these are individuals that have never looked this terror and this horror in the eye. They've never visited a border, port of entry, border crossing, to understand what takes place. Now, The Sound of Freedom took place in Colombia, but I think it is also very illustrative of probably what's also going on in Mexico and along that southern border, and unfortunately here in the United States as well.
Well, the U.S., like Eduardo Bradesky, and I've watched some of his interviews, and he said this many times, the U.S. is the biggest consumer and Mexico the biggest provider. So when President Trump was talking about what's coming over the border, it was true. It wasn't an attack on any particular group. It was an attack on the people who want to profit from the hurting and harming and our children. And when I was at the White House in July 9th of 2020, I said we were blessed. Anytime you invoke God, you're going to have the wrath come upon you, because communism moves away from God, and it's the few controlling the many, and at the end of the day they don't care about about life. They'll be saying, Latinos, which will be, like I said, the biggest group in this country, but soon. What molds us all, what glues us all together, are the values: God, family,
right,
and work. And so that is where we need to do, is to move closer to those values. And this film is bringing that out, and it's going to make a difference. And that's what AFPI does. AFPI goes toward those values, and bringing America first with values that unite us and give value to life.
I think that's right. And I think what you just pointed to, Bob, is really, really important, which is making sure that you're transparent with the American people about all sorts of challenges that we have, right? Not trying to sugarcoat it, not trying to, tell them one thing and the reality is something different. And of course, we've seen that regarding the immense challenge that we have along that southern border over the last 2 years to 28 months, right? Not really being honest about the American people. And so when I obviously watch The Sound of Freedom, and it becomes very obvious, kind of the issues that you're dealing with here. But again, you see this criticism and people say, well, is it really that big of a deal? That being child sex trafficking. Is it really, kind of how this film portrays it? And for me, it's almost another example of, again, whether it's elite media or the elite Hollywood, trying to tell the American people nothing to see here. Everything seems fine, when that's not how you're a responsible individual of this country or your community. You want to see what the problems are, and you want to try to find solutions. And I think that's part of what this film is all about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, over the last 2.5 years, what's happened is, we've incentivized, but not more than incentivized, people coming over. We've gone out and recruited. This gal wrote us, who in April was before the committee. She blew the whistle. She said that the U.S. are the middle people to bring these people in and put them with sponsors who have not necessarily been vetted. Sometimes they're bringing these kids in for pornography, for photographing, for sex, selling for slave labor. And it's not that all of a sudden, 2.5 years ago, everybody got up and said, hey, let's all head to the U.S. border. No, it was an invasion to some extent, but promoted. And so the problem is, this is much bigger, and it's blowing up because I believe that the money behind it is just too much money. Yeah. It's the biggest industry in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we've seen here recently, and I know you know this, Bob, we've seen the New York Times, which is no bastion of conservative thought leadership, talk about how this administration has actually lost contact with over 85,000 children that have come across that border. And so you have to ask yourselves, where are they and what are they doing? And unfortunately, you're going to, I would say, a handful, if not more than a handful of, unfortunately, are probably being trafficked one way or another because of those pull factors and those incentive factors that are at the heart of the border security strategy that we see today.
Not only trafficked, but I hate to say this, but butchered sometimes. Organ harvesting and things like that. That's something that Jim Caviezel was talking about. Says, "Oh, that's QAnon. No, it's evil. It's evil,
right? And
it's happening. And so there's so much. And again, there's so much money in this that right now they're trying to shorten the time that Sound of Freedom's in the theaters. And, they're attacking it as, this is good. This is awareness. It's hard. It pulls at your heart.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, we work with many organizations, and Catholic Charities is a great one too. But a lot of these NGOs, they don't realize in San Antonio, they put up a facility to house about 70,000 kids. But if it weren't for the fact that we're bringing all these kids in, so in a way, the Catholic Charities is being taken advantage of, used to facilitate this, instead of stopping the flow, which we can easily do. We just want to bring it in, and even like I think Becerra says, bring them in, make it more efficient. We got to move this assembly line quicker.
Well,
I can't believe that. It's craziness.
Absolutely. Obviously, during my time at DHS and visiting that border and talking to ICE agents, and again, Tim Ballard worked at DHS and worked at ICE, doing this before he left to start Operation Underground Railroad. I got a firsthand look at a lot of this, and it's not good. But luckily we have individuals like Tim Ballard and others who go unnamed every day. That this is what they do. They deal with these predators. They deal with these individuals every single day, and God bless them for doing so, because our country, our communities are safer for that. Bob, before we end, I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about Goya Cares, because I know it's important to you. It's important to the Goya community. So maybe just bring the listeners up to speed on what you're doing there and the importance of that.
Well, like you say, Tim Ballard, very courageous, and he can save a lot of kids, but it's too big of a problem. And the only way to attack this is through awareness and caring. Like the Bible says, you got to love your neighbor as yourself. And so the idea, Goya Cares comes out of the Sound of Freedom, but it also is born out of COVID and putting ourselves into bunkers and taking away our spirit, our reason to get up every day. Our kids, I have 14 grandkids myself. I have 6 children, and our kids are under attack. They're bullied, and they're committing suicide. The mental health problem, which is a part of Goya Cares. So we want to go out there and say, hey, look, we care about you. You are valued. You are a gift from God. You have a purpose, just like Tim Ballard goes after that one girl. Everybody is worth it. And that's the idea behind Goya Cares. And this movie also is getting the message out. The storytellers, like Jim Caviezel said, and if you listen to the end of the movie, but the heroes of this are the children, because we send the message out that God's children are not for sale and that they have value. We can send a message, and it's the only way to stop this, because there's not enough missions that Tim could go on to save all the kids that are being trafficked today.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think that's a great way to end, which is God's children are not for sale. Bob, thank you not only for everything that you do for AFPI, but obviously to help bring Sound of Freedom to the forefront, to theaters and the awareness, and obviously what you do on Goya Cares. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you spending a little time with us and the listeners, and fighting so hard for combating human trafficking, not only in this country, this hemisphere, but around the world. So with that, I want to say thank you again, and I want to make sure that all that are listening, that you continue to subscribe today so you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. And thank you again, Bob.
Thank you, Chad. And like it says in the movie, when God calls, you cannot hesitate.
Absolutely.
Text the word TANK to 70107. That's TANK to 70107 to get exclusive content from the Tank Podcast and to learn more about the America First Policy Institute.